We are live.
Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to this another episode of the series of webinars that are hosted by AIOS. Today, today's webinar is going to be something different from the regular webinars that you probably have been attending all through. And today's webinar actually is a commemorative one, where we would like to share something that is a momentous occasion, not just for one institute or for one organization, but is a momentous occasion for the entire country. So, the topic of today's webinar is 50,000 corneal transplants. And the reason why this webinar is also very important is the fact that you will hear in the next hour and a half or so not just the fact that 50,000 corneal transplants have been done, but also the journey to get to this magical figure. Joining us on this webinar today, the chairperson of the webinar is going to be Dr. Samar Basak, Dr. Prashant Garg, and Dr. Namrata Sharma. Dr. Samar Basak and Dr. Namrata will join a little later on, and so will Dr. Santosh Honawar and Dr. Manoj Mathur. So the speakers for today's webinar are, all of you know, Dr. Gulapalli Rao, founding chairman of LV Prasad Institute, Dr. Prashant Garg, who is the executive chair of LV Prasad Institute, Dr. Sunita Chaurasia, the head of the Ramayama International Eye Bank at LV Prasad Institute, and me, Praveen, I am the director of the Shantilal Sangvi Cornea Institute at LVPEI. So the sequence of what we'll start with today is we'll start with a little bit about the evolution of eye banking and corneal transplant in the world in general. So we also have an understanding of what is the current scenario of eye banking and corneal transplantation. Following this, Dr. Rao will actually share with us the journey of what it took to get to 50,000 over the last 37 years. Then Dr. Prashant Garg will speak to us about the current scenario of eye banking in India, and we'll round off with a talk that I'll be giving about how to enhance the outcomes of corneal transplants after we've done them. So, without any further delay, I'd like to invite Dr. Sunita Chaurasia to start sharing her screen and also speak to us about the current scenario of eye banking as well as corneal transplantation across the world. Dr. Sunita, over to you.
Are my slides visible
Not yet.
now?
Not yet.
Ravina, visible now?
Ma'am, you need to click on the green button on the Zoom window, please, which is share. Do you have the green button down, sir? I mean, on the bottom? On the Zoom window?
I guess COVID has all taught us Zoom.
No, I'm actually
Perfect, ma'am. We have,
visible now. I press a
it should be.
okay.
Yes, you can
Sorry
make it
for
full screen,
the
please.
yeah. So as my topic was on evolution of eye banking and corneal transplantation world, I changed it to evolution of corneal transplantation and eye banking, I think, because eye banking has always followed keratoplasty, so it should be in that order. So if you look into the evolution of keratoplasty and eye banking, it is nothing short of a modern day Odyssey, and which is complete with the cast of larger than life heroes with their brilliant and heroic feats.
Unmute, Sunita, unmute.
So the current, I'll just start off from this slide. The current contemporary techniques are the results of concepts, ideas, and experiments and perseverance over centuries. If we look into the history of keratoplasty, it is peppered with the stories of failure and triumphs, which has created a path for the modern era of successful keratoplasty. So the era of corneal transplantation can be divided into 7 epochs. And if we look into the historic times, the early ages have been referred to as the dark ages. Thereafter, the era of the penetrating keratoplasty, which had some success, and then from 1995 onwards, the era is known as the radical awakening of lamellar keratoplasty techniques. Similar kind of thing has also been proposed by Sir Benjamin Rykoff, where the initial years have been referred to as the era of inspiration, trials and frustrations in keratoplasty techniques. But there was a conviction, and thereafter, from 1904 onwards, it has been the era of achievement and refinement and innovations in keratoplasty techniques. Now, how did keratoplasty actually begin? Now, everything, as we all know, begins with a thought. And this was well conceptualized by Darwin. And this was in the 18th century when he said that after an ulcer, perhaps the scar could be cut out and it could heal with the transparent tissue. Now, though the concept was there in 18th century, it is a 20th century which is remembered as the era of successful organ and tissue transplantation. And amongst all transplantations, corneal transplant was the first one. And this was followed by the other solid organ transplants like heart and the kidney. So this is a picture showing the first corneal transplantation, which was performed by Dr. Edward Zerm in 1904. And if we look into a little bit about what happened to Dr. Zerm's keratoplasty, the first keratoplasty was performed with donor corneas, which were refined with 5 millimeter fawn nipple refine. The right corneal transplant had failed, but the left cornea had cleared and had a visual acuity of 6/36 as 1 year. Dr. Zerm, who passed in 1944, did not record any other corneal transplantations in his next 45 publications throughout his lifetime, which means possibly this may be a speculation, but we know that the early quarter of the 20th century, between 1905 to 1925, much of the literature heavily criticized keratoplasty with the human cornea, and this was a time where the use of xenotransplants was explored. And this is one paper which heavily condemned sort of keratoplasty in those times. The early quarter also saw the evolution of corneal preservation solutions, and the earliest one was antiseptic fluid along with the moist chamber method. The mid of the 20th century, from Dr. Jose Barraker, who was another pioneer in keratoplasty from Spain, he used a donor tissue of 6.5 millimeters in diameter, and the suturing was done using fine silk sutures and Reschaber's needles. The third quarter, that is the late 1950s and early 60s, Mackensen and Harms from West Germany initiated the use of nylon sutures instead of silk sutures in keratoplasty. The third quarter, there was many innovations happened in surgical microscope, and it was Dr. Richard Troutman who introduced the nylon sutures in USA along with microscope for keratoplasty, and thus keratoplasty actually became a microsurgery. In 1968, tenonylon for use was for keratoplasty, and it was commercially available from Ethicon. The third quarter also saw validation of certain other techniques of preservation from Castrovillo, and the Castrovillo Society was formed by him. He also devised several numerous instruments and also popularized a square-shaped corneal grafts. It was believed that this kind of graft may be a little better for keratoconus, and this was one of the standard practice for keratoconus management for quite some time. The fourth quarter of the 20th century saw the evolution of several preservation medium. The MK medium, which was the first one, was introduced in 1970s. The viscoelastics were introduced in early 1980s, and Optisol was much later, that was introduced in 1990s. Now, after Zerm's milestone in 1904, much of the improvements were made only in terms of microscope, sutures, antibiotics, steroids, but there was not much change in the surgical techniques. And it was only from late 90s and 21st century till date, which has seen a sort of explosion in more selective corneal transplantation techniques, essentially mainly in the endothelial keratoplasty techniques. Thereafter, much of the research has also happened into evolution of component corneal surgery and cell-based therapy. If you look into the evolution of posterior lamellar keratoplasty, the first attempt by till it was not very successful. The first clinically successful 1998, which was pioneered by Melly. The diseased endothelium with a donor comprised posterior stroma and endothelium. The similar technique was popularized in the USA and was called as DLEG by Mark A. Terry. However, DLEG did not gain much of popularity as the dissection of the posterior stroma was technically challenging, and this was fraught with several complications such as dislocation of the posterior lamellar graft. This was made simplified by the adoption of Descemet stripping endothelial keratoplasty, and this was in the year 2005. It was shown that instead of dissecting the posterior cornea, one could simply strip the Descemet's membrane, followed by the insertion of the graft by means of an air bubble. Now, this technique was revolutionary in concept because it was easy to learn, it had excellent outcomes, and had several benefits over the traditional PK. Later on, in 2006, it was Michael Gervo who introduced the use of microkeratome, and thus the manual dissection technique of the donor preparation became automated. This was again a big advancement because this made the technique of donor preparation possible in the eye bank. The DM scroll preparation was shown by Descemet technique again in 2005, 2002 to 2005 between by Jarek Melly's group. And subsequently, it was DMEC which became popular. And this became the standard practice of endothelial transplant in the later years. The impact of posterior corneal surgeries has been tremendous, and because this has made the expansion in the traditional roles of the eye bank. Conventionally, most of the preparation techniques were done by the surgeons, but because of the impact of the posterior corneal surgeries, keratoplasty began its journey in the eye bank itself due to adoption of preparation techniques by the eye bank technicians. The pre-cut DSEC and pre-prepared DMEC are now a norm in most of the eye banks. Simultaneously, along with the endothelial keratoplasty techniques, the deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty techniques became popular, and this was majorly from the big bubble advancement technique, which was standard and reproducible technique and was adopted widely for management of very common anterior lamellar pathologies. Now, the role of clinical researchers and basic researchers are alike, and this was one concept from Nancy Joyce, who discovered that the human corneal endothelial cells could proliferate and replicate under special conditions. This formed the basis of the cell-based therapy, and this was shown in the year 2018 by Kinoshita about the role of direct endothelial cell injection in management of endothelial diseases. So if you look into the evolution of eye banking has shadowed keratoplasty, and it has kept pace with the changes in the keratoplasty techniques and the needs of the corneal surgeon. Several eye bank associations have evolved across continents to ensure quality guidelines in eye banking. The journey of eye banking began with the preservation of the whole eyeball, and this was first proposed by Filatov in 1930, who was bestowed with the father of eye banking. And subsequently, the first eye bank was established in 1944 in the US, and this was the eye bank for sight restoration in the New York. The beginning of Indian eye banking began with the first eye bank in 1945 at RIO Chennai, and this was by the efforts of Dr. E.S. Muthaiya, who was also the very first persons to do the first transplant in India, along with Dr. R.P. Danda. So along with efforts, now Indian eye banking has taken several strides, and this has been only possible through the efforts of the NPCB, several NGOs, several supporters from both national and international platform. That apart, there are several efforts which have been made by various eye banks across the nation in various parts of India that has contributed to progress in eye banking. Now, if you look at the scenario of eye banking in India compared to the global level, India stands second highest in cornea collection and transplants after the US. And when you look at this map, this is pretty impressive for eye bank because India is in a stage where it can evolve into a very self-sufficient country and possibly also into an exporter of cornea compared to other rest part of the world where journey has not taken that rapid trajectory. Now, when we look into the success of eye banking across the world, the trajectory of the eye banking, it is well understood in many countries governed by several social factors. However, the main key pillars of the success story are its torchbearers. In most instances, it has been the visionary corneal surgeons with exceptional foresights and conviction to defy the conventional norms which has governed the success of eye banking in any nation. That apart, the contribution of those with shared visions has played a big role in evolution of eye banking in India. With this, I end this slide by expressing my gratitude to the torchbearer of eye banking and keratoplasty in LVPI, and I dedicate this saying to him. It was मैं अकेला ही चला था, लोग साथ चलते गए और कारवां बढ़ता गया. This is something which is applicable to none other than our Dr. Rao, and thank you for patient hearing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chaurasia. So that was a very succinct summary of how eye banking as well as corneal transplantation started and how it has evolved. Welcome Dr. Namrata Sharma as well as Dr. Santosh Honawar also joined. Dr. Namrata Sharma, over to you, please.
Thank you, Praveen, and thanks to LVPI, I think, in general, for showing us the way, for showing us that 50,000 transplants are possible, which happened at LVPI. And like Dr. Rao has already said earlier also, that nobody believed that this could happen, but it has happened. And I think this has a different connotation as well, because our journey into iBanking is not yet complete. And I'm sure there would be a day when we would achieve the mission impossible. And the mission impossible, which will become possible, I'm sure, is that there will be no waiting, at least in India, for corneal transplants. So many congratulations on this. And this is a model which has to be adopted in the entire country. And I'm sure it will happen. Thank you, Dr. Rao, for showing all of us the path.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Namrata Sharma. So we'll move on to the next talk.
Yeah,
And
Praveen, I have a suggestion. There's hardly any audience. Just the 7 of us, from what I see.
No, Dr. Rao.
No. Actually, they are on the YouTube and the Facebook. This is only the speakers link, so that would have only the speakers and the panelists.
Okay.
So I will just find out how many there are.
Yeah, thank you.
Think there are about 200 people online, Dr. Rao, Facebook and YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah. So the next topic actually is about the actual journey of how corneal transplantation began and how the scenario was about 35 to 37 years back when Dr. Rao traveled back from the US to set up the LV Prasad Eye Institute. And like Dr. Namrata Sharma shared with you, that was a point of time when nobody believed that India could probably make a mark in the area of corneal transplants. And I think this journey has given us a lot of hope as well as conviction that not only is it possible to achieve what is required, but probably also lead from the front in the future as well. So over to Dr. Rao to speak about journey that he's witnessed firsthand over the last 37 years in being able to achieve what we've been able to share with everyone today. Dr. Rao.
Thanks, Praveen. Let me go to my...
So, Praveen, there are 450 plus people. Just now, I got this thing on YouTube, combined YouTube, Facebook, and the link, Zoom link.
Okay, just let me see my presentation here. As you can see, I am technology incompetent.
Humble request, sir. Open your presentation, then please share. It won't open. Can I stop?
Yeah.
Just open your presentation, then please do the share.
Thank you. Let me leave and come back for a minute.
Not required, sir.
Sorry, while Dr. Rao joins in again and gets his presentation online, I think Dr. Chaurasia also shared how it all began and where we are right now. But Dr. Chaurasia, you also are very aware of the fact that there are rapid strides being made in the area of corneal transplantation right now. So do you see that maybe in the next 10 years or so, we will continue to see eye banking as well as corneal transplantation evolve rapidly? Do you think there will not be a lot of change? Where do you see the next 10 years or so progress?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Praveen. I think there are many things which are going to come up in even when we talk about the cell-based therapies. I think in future it's going to be the eye bank becomes the source from where the cells are going to be sent to the community for transplantation as a cell-based therapy as well. So eye banking will be still relevant despite the changes in the techniques which will be adopted by the corneal surgeons. But then the functionality of the eye bank with respect to the conventional techniques will keep changing, and which will be incorporated at the eye bank level itself. So it is going to happen, but then the traditional roles and the upcoming roles will sort of merge in future. That is what is my perception. Apart from that, several other things will come up in terms of newer ways of preservation. Even if there are biosynthetic implants coming up, so these will possibly also be through the eye bank. Dr. Rao has joined.
Yes, Dr. Rao, you're on mute. If you could unmute and then share your slides. Dr. Rao, can you unmute, please?
Sunil, can you unmute Dr. Rao, please?
Yes.
I'm asking, he's done it now.
Yeah. Okay. Share. Can you see my slides?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry for that. Thanks everybody for your patience. And okay. I think corneal blindness globally is one of the major forms of blindness. And in countries like India and sub-Saharan Africa, it assumes a greater proportion of the causes of blindness.
So,
and in India, we have the largest magnitude of blindness.
so Dr. Rao, can we just go to the slideshow?
We don't have it. Okay.
No, slideshow. Just click slideshow. I think then the whole slide will come, which is
I
top.
click the slideshow.
So on the top, just
Top.
above the blue map, there is the slideshow.
It says your screen sharing. That's what it says. Can I go ahead without slides?
Dr. Rao, we can see your
slides.
slides.
So we can see very well, Dr. Rao. Just click slideshow. So the whole thing will come up on one screen only.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I only seeing your screen sharing and next to it is stop share.
No, I think what you do not, that at the bottom, if you see if you bring your cursor at the bottom,
Yeah.
3 squares. And the last one is the slideshow. You can click that also.
Next.
Right. Yes, right one. Right to this, sir. Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes,
You
perfect.
have it now.
Perfect.
Okay. So as you can see in the representative map that was actually presented many years ago by the SightLife group, shows the magnitude of the burden of corneal blindness in India proportionate to the rest of the world. We all know that most of the corneal blindness is in fact avoidable, preventable, and treatable. So if you are thinking of a corneal transplantation, once a corneal opacification happens, there are certain requisites that we have to satisfy for a successful corneal transplantation. The first is the quality of the donor cornea that we use. Second is the nature of recipient pathology for which we are actually contemplating the procedure. And then a whole host of care issues, which include the surgeon's training, infrastructure of the corneal transplantation center, and the follow-up care subsequent to keratoplasty. When you look at the eye bank, we have to realize that eye banking is not a professional responsibility. It is, in fact, the responsibility of the community. That means it has to have a collaborative effort among professionals, general public, government, voluntary not-for-profit agencies, and the media. If you look at the eye banking, we have to discuss under the titles of the structure of the eye bank, the various functions, the challenges of quantity and quality, and the networking for optimal utilization of every transplantable cornea without any wastage. So if we look at the current situation in our country, there is suboptimal involvement of all categories: cornea specialists, ophthalmologists, and medical professionals. And the government, only marginal involvement with some funding support, with legislation pending for a long time now. In the public, there is reasonable awareness, but the number of eye donations is still very negligible, and the support again is negligible. So compare this to the cataract success story. The same 3 groups. Professionals are very enthusiastic because of the economic incentive, professional satisfaction, comfort level, and less hassles of follow-up care. Policymakers, government invested huge amounts of money over the past nearly 40 years to make the cataract surgical case stronger and tackle the cataract blindness better. And in the public also, there is significant awareness about the cataract problem. So what we really need are champions for eye banking and corneal transplantation and comprehensive systems to develop the entire thing. If we want to increase the quantity of corneas, the first is HCRP. That can be achieved through passing a required request law, which I believe we passed, but we never implemented and enforced. Active participation of a measure, at least 500 big general hospitals across the country, I believe, and each provided with well-trained grief counselors working around the clock. The second approach is enhancing public awareness through professional groups, working with voluntary organizations, media, and social networks. Third, of course, is legislation, proactive and supportive legislation. What we already have in place is the role of the trained technicians, allowing them to actually remove the cornea from the donor, and the required request law. Long overdue, however, is the modification of TOTA that is in some ways delaying the process of corneal donations. And finally, the community support. Lions, Rotary, and other social organizations should also actively participate, and it's slowly increasing, not yet adequate. In terms of quality, we have to follow the established uniform medical standards for all eye banks. There should be standards for infrastructure of an eye bank. And we have to have all cadres of eye banking personnel well-trained, put in place monitoring and evaluation systems, and also the operating systems for an eye bank. So as Atul Gawande said, success in medicine has some core requirements: diligence, to do right, and ingenuity. Nowhere is it more required than in the area of eye banking and corneal transplantation. When we come to corneal transplantation service, it has to be a comprehensive service. Cornea clinical care supported by a very active international standard eye bank, a contact lens service, microbiology support, refractive surgery support, and pathology to have a full-fledged cornea unit. When we started corneal transplantation at LVPEI 37 years ago, we were just 2 cornea specialists, and we were getting occasionally tissues due to the generosity of Gautam Mazmudar Bhai from the Ahmedabad Eye Bank, and during Christmas time and holidays from the US, with a lot of problems for customs clearance, etc. We had long waiting lists, and our non-paying patients were admitted in the wards for weeks together waiting for their turn. And in the first year, we could just perform 20 corneal transplants. The eye banking beginning, the concept for the eye bank was developed by us. The blueprint was provided by the International Federation of the Eye Banks at that time. And funding, the initial funding came from a generous supporter, local supporter, to get going with the eye bank. A couple of years later, with the encouragement and support of the director of Nizam Sub-Institute of Medical Sciences, we could, for the first time in the country, institute the hospital cornea retrieval program that has proved pivotal in our journey of eye banking and corneal transplantation. Then we have developed the MK medium preservation media lab and started doing corneal scleral button excision only, not the removal of the entire eye. Then came the technician-based procedures, pre-cut facility, and finally expansion of HCRP along the way to multiple hospitals in all the 3 states where we work. We also provided more space and equipment along the way. This is the infrastructure that is so critical. an executive director along with higher level human resources, and all kinds of technology and support strong operating systems. Funding came predominantly from philanthropy, some grants, a little bit of revenue generation from the processing fee of the paying patients wherever we supplied it, and some internal resources of the institution. And about 12 years ago, we started providing the pre-cut tissue with the inauguration of that facility. So corneal transplantation, we need international standard eye banking, cornea education programs, and also capacity building programs. The secret of our success is the committed management, excellent human resources, technical partnership with people who have the knowledge and technology in the US, resource mobilization, and partnership with general hospitals for HCRP. In the institute itself, the provision of well-trained human resources, infrastructure, systems, and overall enabling environment for eye banking and corneal transplantation. So we also have advanced training for faculty. We prepared the faculty to tackle the challenge. We had several visiting professors and scholars coming from around the world working with us and helping us, and always staying relevant and current with our practices. So we did everything to nurture the talent that we have available. In the initial years, until about 7-8 years ago, the corneal transplantation is confined to our tertiary care and advanced tertiary care level centers. And more recently, we have migrated this care to some of our secondary level centers and taking care really closer to the people who need it most. And there are some benefits, as you can see here. The follow-up care is much better when you perform these procedures at secondary level because the distance that the patient has to travel for follow-up care is smaller compared to tertiary care. So if you make the care available, accessible, and affordable, enabling care with greater reach, more and more people will benefit from it. And better follow-up also leads to lower failure rate. And our patients come from all over the country and a few from outside. And as you can see here, the people who are taking online consultation come from all corners of the country. And here again is a comparison between the secondary and tertiary centers, both in terms of distance and the cost. And you see the clear advantage when you take the care closer to the people. So this is another element that we have added in the past 7 years. Our Technology Innovation Center came up with this innovation called Grabby, an attachment to the smartphone where the patient can actually take the picture and send it to us so that we can assess the situation of the corneal graft in the post-operative period. And these are the number of Grabby devices that have been prescribed over the years. Now, as a routine, all corneal transplant patients at the time of discharge are provided with a Grabby device. In addition to enhance the quality of follow-up for our patients, as well as to enhance the capacity building across the country in the care of corneal disease, we started long and short-term fellowships, observerships, several continuing education programs, and also do the support system for several residency programs around us. And these are all the alumni from different parts of the world. In research, of course, we have some areas of focus, and we continue to be very active in this area. Importantly, we help 12 international programs with capacity building in eye banking and transplantation, and 8 of the national programs. Technology development for screening and diagnosis, it helped us to enhance primary care of the corneal diseases, remote and home care, and follow-up care. So these are all the various developments in terms of product development. And all these are employed in the care of our cornea patients as well as corneal transplantation. Nationally and globally in advocacy, we played an active role in the area of eye banking, awareness about corneal blindness, in working with lobbying for more governmental support, and in education. So this in general is the comprehensive picture of our Cornea Institute, involved in various facets of cornea care, making an impact. If we were to do 100,000 corneal transplants a year in our country, if we compare the magnitude of the problem with the capacity, we are grossly under capacity. Unfortunately, most trained cornea specialists in our country remain relatively quiet, not performing the required number. So we have to activate them, encourage them. We have to train more cornea specialists. And we also have to provide the knowledge of cornea care and caring for transplants among our practicing ophthalmologists as well as ophthalmologists in training. So we have gross underutilization or participation of already trained cornea specialists. Actually, we have adequate number in the country, and regretfully, they are not all participating in this exercise. My own thinking in terms of a formula for our country: 50 eye banks of international standards, 500 major hospitals with HCRP programs, and 500 of our surgeons actively doing transplants at a rate of 200 transplants a year per surgeon. And all residency training programs, tertiary care hospitals should have at least 1 to 2 corneal specialists with an active transplantation program. They don't need eye banks, but they need transplantation service. And the government, we need favorable legislation to modify TOTA, a required request, consolidate it and support it, and supporting the eye banks financially with capital grants, grief counselors, employment and their salaries, and processing fee for those who cannot afford to pay for processing fee among our patients. Without question, this medical care that we can provide and help the other countries is a powerful tool of soft diplomacy that we can use across the world. Many developing countries are looking for our lead and help from us, and we have an opportunity here that can contribute to the elimination of corneal blindness globally. The question is, are we up to it? It's for the Cornea Society, together with Eye Bank Association of India and the All India Ophthalmological Society, to come up with strategies and implement it. And I strongly believe the solutions are out there, and if we are ready, we can reach the 100,000 by 2030. So as Mahatma Gandhi said, strength does not come from physical capacity, it comes from an indomitable will. Let us hope the leadership of our societies come up with this indomitable will and eliminate the problem of corneal blindness in our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rao. So, like you and Dr. Chaurasia shared about the journey that we've undertaken to reach here, and thank you for just pointing out that this is just the beginning, and there is still a very long way to go before we start to make inroads into eliminating or making a significant impact on corneal blindness. Dr. Namrata Sharma?
I think the last few slides were really very, very inspiring. And I'm sure Dr. Rao believes it. And he believed one thing and he did it, I think, as a part of our tribute to his belief, we should also do the same. And I'm sure it is possible. He's already very nicely pointed out the people who can do it. And thank you again, Dr. Rao, for inspiring it yet once again and once more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rao, for along with all the luminaries that were mentioned, including Dr. R.P. Dhanda and Dr. Kalevar and everybody else who started off the journey. And I guess it is now up to the current as well as the future generations to ensure that this dream comes true. So next up, we have Dr. Prashant Garg. Dr. Prashant Garg is instrumental in setting up as well as chaperoning, along with Dr. Rao, the iBanking system within LVP, as well as having played a major role in the EBAI nationally. And he's going to be speaking about the current status of iBanking in the country. Over to you, Dr. Prashant Garg.
Thank you, Praveen. And let me just share my slides. Are my slides visible?
Yes.
Yeah, you're doing better.
Okay, good. So thank you, Dr. Rao, for a very inspiring talk and really paving the way for my talk as well. I would like to thank at the outset All India Ophthalmic Society for organizing this webinar. This is really a momentous occasion for our country. An institution in a country where cornea donation and corneal transplantation was considered as a distant dream, and we are able to achieve a goal of 50,000 transplants by its organization. I think it's occasion for celebration. The topic for my talk is current scenario of iBanking in India. If we look at the history of Indian iBanking, we realize that we have done very well when we started our journey into iBanking. Within 1 year of the first iBank started in United States, our country also inaugurated the first iBank at Madras Eye Infirmary. And within another 15 years, our group performed the first corneal transplant. The iBanking has gone through different phases of evolution. In 1976, the National Program for Control of Blindness was started. In 1989, the iBank Association of India was established. By 1990, we had Hospital Cornea Retrieval Program. And then the Transplantation of Human Organ Act was passed in 1994. In the same year, at LV Prasad Eye Institute, we set up a laboratory for preparation of MK medium. And it is because of all these evolutions that despite having a large magnitude of corneal blindness, we possibly are on the very optimistic side of having almost sufficient number of corneas available to our corneal surgeons. While this looks a very optimistic picture, this probably is an underestimate if we look into the number of people suffering with corneal opacity related vision impairment and blindness. With corneal scar being the second most important cause of blindness in our country, those numbers look too optimistic. And it is possible that many of the patients who require transplant are not really reaching corneal surgeons and are not availing services. In this background, when an institution or organization from our country has achieved the goal of 50,000 corneal transplantation, it's an occasion for celebration. In this current scenario, the objectives of my talk will be to give you some of the challenges of iBanking and corneal transplantation, to provide you perspective of the current scenario, and then the lessons that we have learned at LV Prasad Eye Institute with the evolution of iBanking, at our organization and some of the innovative programs that we adopted in order to keep pace with the number of patients who came to us for care of corneal diseases. I will also talk about some of the plans that LVPEI has going forward in coming years. You all will realize that if we have to take care of blindness because of corneal scar and corneal related pathology, at this point of time, we have to rely on availability of donor corneal tissues. And therefore, if we have to tackle the problem of corneal blindness, we would require quality eye banking, ensuring availability of enough number of corneas for transplantation, well-trained cornea specialist, and a good mechanism for providing post-operative care. During this eye donation fortnight, there was an article published in the Times of India, which highlighted that despite having millions who die each year, we are collecting only 30,000 to 35,000, or 30,000 to 35,000 people are donating corneas, translating into about 60 to 70,000 corneas that we are able to collect. This is far less than the number of corneas that we require to tackle the problem of corneal blindness. The problem is not because of the number of eye banks in our country. As you can see from this map, we have large number of eye banks scattered all throughout the country. But the question is that many of these eye banks are not performing their duty and are not true eye banks. In a survey conducted by Praveen Krishna, it was found that currently around 165 eye banks are registered with Eye Bank Association of India, of which 94 are not collecting any tissues. Out of 71 active eye banks, 20 collected less than 100 tissues. 28 collected between 100 and 500 tissues, and it is only 11 eye banks that collected between 500 to 1,000 tissues. Many of the eye banks rely on the number of pledges as the key performance indicators. However, there is no mechanism to ensure that all of these pledges are translated into actual donations. Hospital cornea retrieval program, despite its proven efficacy, is not uniformly adopted by all the eye banks. To further complicate the situation is slow adoption of favorable legislations by the government, as was highlighted by Dr. Rao in his talk as well. And it is because of these multiple factors that today, unfortunately, we are seeing these kind of news items in public media. The government is considering closing down all the eye banks that do not collect 100 corneas a year. It is not just the quantity of corneas collected by eye bank. Another challenge is about the quality of eye banking. And this is despite having legislation for trained personnel to collect corneas, medical standards which have in 2020 were even revised, and we are familiar with how to perform accreditation and certification. I do not want to talk of what's not happening and would like to highlight some of the optimism. And here I will be using some of the lessons that we have learned at LVPEI Eye Institute. The eye bank was inaugurated in 1989, and within first year of inauguration, we started hospital cornea retrieval program in collaboration with a large multi-specialty healthcare institution, the Nizam Institute of Medical Sciences. We also realized that if we have to store corneal tissues for a longer period of time, we require better preservation methods and not just depend upon the cold storage method. Because of these efforts, we today are able to preserve corneas for close to 96 hours. And with the Optisol coming in, we are able to preserve corneas for 14 days. And all of these innovations really translated into the number of corneas that we saw growing in our organization. In last year, we collected close to about 12,000 plus corneas in our network eye banks. It was because of all these efforts that by 2005, we were able to eliminate waitlist at our institution. And soon we started supplying corneas to other centers and other corneal surgeons working within the state as well as outside of our state. We also realized that there is a need for trained human resource, and in 1995, with the help of Eyesight International, we started a training program for eye bank personnel. In 2003, with the efforts from Orbis and Eyesight International, along with LVPEI Eye Institute, we participated in a project where we helped 10 other eye banks to build their human resource, the standard protocols for operations, and help them have a better infrastructure. Subsequently, these efforts were supported by partnership with Sight Life, who started an India office and helped many eye banks in upgrading their human resource skills and helped accelerate the number of corneas that we collected. Today, all eye banking activities in our organization are conducted by trained eye bank personnel under the supervision of a medical director. I think we also have learned the value of a pyramidal model or three-tier model for eye banking and realize that how effective it can be if we have to take care of cornea-related blindness and have a very effective eye banking model. More recently, we are also helping other states in setting up eye banks in major eye care organizations. The first such effort was at All India Institute of Medical Sciences in Rishikesh, and that eye bank is currently become the source of corneal tissues and transplantation in Uttarakhand as well as neighboring Uttar Pradesh. The second such eye bank was started in Guwahati Medical College ophthalmology department, and they are also supplying corneas to corneal surgeons in Northeast region. The third such eye bank was inaugurated in Banaras Hindu University Institute of Medical Sciences, and it has also more recently, we are planning to start eye banks at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Patna, as well as Regional Eye Institute in Ranchi. I am sure that with these efforts of creating eye banking infrastructure in parts of country where no such facility exists is going to give us a very positive results as far as availability of corneal tissues is concerned. And if we can really build a central distribution system, all corneal surgeons will be benefited from these efforts. On the research front, our team is also working on creating a synthetic 3D printed corneal tissue. And they are at an advanced stage. And I am very hopeful of that we will have some kind of a cornea-like tissue to be used for cornea replacement surgeries. I think with model eye banks, the hospital cornea retrieval program, well laid out standards of eye bank and accreditation and certification, our dream of eliminating corneal blindness is not far off. However, the need of the hour is that we adopt this 3-tier model in our country. We motivate all the existing eye banks to either become part of this 3-tier system or step up their activities. We liaise with governments to pass supportive legislatures which are long pending, and then create mechanisms which will allow accreditation and ensuring compliance to the medical standards. Our dream is that no one should wait for the availability of corneal tissue, and corneal blindness should get wiped out as an important cause of blindness in our country. With 50,000 corneal transplants that we have performed, I see that this dream is not something that we cannot fulfill. It is what it requires is combined effort of all fronts to fight this battle. And I am hopeful of winning this battle very soon. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. I would also like to thank all our staff for really help us in realizing this dream and showing us that these dreams can be made reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prashant Garg, for actually setting the stage of where we are right now, which I think gives us all an idea of where we need to progress to in the future as well. Dr. Namrata Sharma, would you have any comments?
I completely agree with what you've said, Praveen, and I think Prashant has really summed it up very well as to what we need to do for the future. And I'm sure, I hope at least for so many generations, we've been saying that there's paucity of good quality donor corneas in India. And our generation at least doesn't go, saying that, and it happens before that. So that is the challenge I think we all have to take combined cumulatively, and to see that, it kind of comes true.
So thank you very much. And just to follow up on what we've heard so far about the current scenario of eye banking in the world, as well as in India, and what is happening in corneal transplantation. And like Dr. Rao said, what is the requirement of the current hour and what we all need to do together. It is very apparent that there are challenges, but all of these can be surmounted very easily. And I think one of the objectives of having today's webinar with the kind support of AIOS, Dr. Namrata Sharma, Dr. Santosh Honawar, Dr. Manoj Mathur, as well as Dr. Samar Basak, is to share that even in challenging circumstances in a country like ours, where eye donation itself has been a challenge, it is possible to actually get and make a significant change in the scenario of eye banking and in corneal transplants. All we have to do is think of the patients some of us see from less fortunate countries who come in for corneal transplants, and these are generally patients who are well-to-do, who are able to access care in other countries, whereas the people who probably do not have that access are going to be consigned to a life of probably poor vision. And I think we are very fortunate that we have several leaders in the entire country who've been able to make this possible. And I think the onus does lie with us as well as the next generations in taking this forward. So I'd like to share a brief presentation, which actually is a compilation of potential solutions that are in evolution right now as we speak, and solutions that we can look forward to in the future. And this is titled Corneal Transplantations and Beyond. And I'll sort of dovetail into what we've discussed so far from the perspective of what we've achieved and what is yet to be achieved in the future. So again, the landmark of the 50,000 transplants has been achieved by a very unique team of highly skilled corneal surgeons who are currently present in the institute, as well as several alumni, as well as several faculty members of LVPEI who have passed through the doors in the last 35 years as well. So the credit not only goes to the leadership as well as to the current generation who are present, but also to all the past generations who have helped contribute to this unique number as well. So of these 50,000 transplants, you can see that the growth actually has been a little slow in the early years. In 1987, there were only about 2 transplants that were done. And then the growth started steadily over the next 15 years or so. The exponential growth started in 2000s, and then following that in 2010 again. And though you see there is a dip in 2010-20 when there was the COVID pandemic, there's been a steady rise in the number of transplants that have been done every year in the institute as well. Of the transplants that have been done, about a third are full thickness transplants, about a third are therapeutic transplants, and there is a significant number of endothelial transplants that are being done, along with the anterior lamellar as well as the limbal stem cell transplants too. Majority of patients who undergo transplant, about 60%, are adults, and the next largest group is the senior citizens, followed by children, who also form about 10.5% of the patients who've had transplants. Most of the transplants have been done by the center in Hyderabad, but like Dr. Rao shared with you, there is a significant contribution by the other tertiary centers in smaller cities, as well as transplants that are being done in rural areas, because that seems to be the way to go from the point of view of reducing travel as well as cutting down costs. About 2/3 of all the patients who've had transplants among the 50,000 were male, about 1/3 are female, and this too is another challenge that we need to address from the point of view of access and ensuring that we have equitable distribution as well as provision of the availability of corneal transplants to all our populations as well. Another very unique feature has been that 45% of all the transplants that have been done out of the 50,000, that is 20,000 or more, have been performed in patients who don't pay anything for their transplants. And this is again very telling, because from the point of view of affordability, it's very important to understand that corneal transplants will never be in the economic zone as cataract will be, but needs some amount of philanthropy as well as some amount of community participation to be able to achieve that goal. The transplants that have been done, this is a count of all the transplants that have been done over the last 35 years. And you'll see that you have patients coming from all across to access getting corneal surgery as well as the tissue transplants at Hyderabad. This is a slide that Dr. Rao shared again in the beginning. But again, what is important from the numbers point of view is that corneal blindness is the #1 cause of blindness in patients who are aged less than 50 years. And it is the second leading cause of blindness in patients who are aged more than 50 years. And this again is something that is very important, because if you assess the fact that the number of years a younger patient has to live with a corneal disease, actually means that corneal blindness is almost half as important from the point of view of contribution to cataract blindness. And though all of us know that cataracts are a major problem, we seem to have solved most of that problem right now. And the next big challenge probably is corneal blindness for all of us. The challenges that Dr. Rao mentioned a little earlier about affordability, about availability of corneal tissues, accessibility of corneal surgeons to be able to perform the surgery, as well as accountability from the point of view of ensuring survival are probably the keys to ensuring that we hit maybe 100,000 transplant mark in the entire country over the next 10 years or so every year. So when you talk about corneal transplants, there are probably three major areas that we could probably focus on. The first area is not just in doing transplants, but also in trying to prevent the patients who require corneal transplants from needing a transplant. Early detection and treatment of several diseases like infections probably will reduce this, as well as newer therapies like early detection of keratoconus and cross-linking, as all of us are seeing right now, can also prevent the number of patients who will need a corneal transplant. Similarly, better training, even in cataract surgery, will potentially reduce the number of patients who have endothelial disorders who will eventually require corneal transplant as well. In addition to this, you also heard from Dr. Prashant Garg and Dr. Sunita Chaurasia about what we need to do from the eye banking perspective, about setting up new eye banks, upgrading existing eye banks, and also increasing the number of donations to help improve the number of corneal transplants we do. But another area of corneal transplants that we don't pay a lot of attention to is to also enhance the survival of the ones that we are already doing. So if you do the math, setting up about 10 new eye banks over a period of 10 years will only enhance the number of tissues available by about 10,000 or so. And upgrading eye banks will also take the entire pool of donor corneal tissues in the country to about 80,000 or so. And we'll need about 100,000 tissues plus to be donated in a year to be able to take care of all the patients who require corneal transplants. So it may not just be enough to set up more eye banks, may not just be enough to upgrade the existing ones, but we also have to focus on ensuring that the transplants that we're doing right now are high quality ones, and we also pay attention to making sure that they survive for as long as possible. So why do we say that this is important? This is a slide that Dr. Prashant Garg shared with you some time back from the point of view of availability of corneal tissues. And we know that there are a few eye banks who are high performing in the country and who actually are collecting the majority of corneas. About 13 eye banks in the country collect about 70% of all the tissues that are available for transplant in the country. Now, in addition to this, you also heard a comment about how right now when a patient wants to pledge their eyes, all they do is they go to an eye bank, they fill up a card, and that card is filed in a closet or a cupboard in the eye bank. And there is no way in which either the family of the patient who desires to donate their eyes, nor the eye bank is able to retrieve this card and retrieve this pledge at the appropriate time. So what we are trying to do is we've developed a very innovative app on a mobile phone along with Infosys Foundation, which is called Sight Connect. Now, this is an app that is supposed to help patients to self-screen their eyes, where they are asked a set of questions, and they also are subjected to a vision test, both near as well as distance. And there is a photograph that is taken of their eyes, which helps to sort of triage patients from the point of view of requiring eye care and the urgency of eye care. Now, once this gets into the hands of a significant number of people, we also have started a very innovative service, which is called iPledge, where using this app, you actually can pledge your eyes, or you can pledge the fact that you would like to donate your eyes in the future as well. What this does is this collects information not only of the person who's pledging their eyes, but also collects information about their kin as well as the relationship to their kin, and then will pass on this information to the local eye bank where that person is residing, so that the eye bank is aware of the fact that there is somebody who has pledged their eyes, and there actually is a digital repository of people who pledged their eyes. In addition to this, what we're also trying to do is to integrate this system with the ABA ID, which is a medical ID for all patients right now. And we hope that in the future, when it is time to consider eye donation, the ABA ID, which actually is part of a general hospital's ID as well, will be triggered, and this trigger will go to the local eye bank, and they will be notified about the desire of a patient or a person to donate their eyes, and the same notification will go to the family as well, thus ensuring that the desire is fulfilled of someone who's decided to donate their eyes while they were alive, as well as ensuring that eye banks have information in a country where the number of voluntary donations are already quite low. In addition to this, we also have been working with Infosys Foundation in building a complete solution for handling as well as managing an eye bank on an app on a mobile phone, from the point of view of the referral information to the point of view of the donor's medical information, as well as the physical assessment of the eye, as well as the assessment of the cornea after it's been retrieved from the donor as well. What we hope that this will do will be the fact that it will convert a lot of eye banks, which are probably not collecting adequate tissues right now, to be enabled to collect more corneas in the future, because of the fact that they will be notified about a potential donor in their vicinity. It also will provide a unified system where eye banks will be able to collect information as well as process their information in a defined, standardized method by using an online software. And we also have been working on developing what we called an evaluation system, where we are right now capturing images of patients of eyes that come to the eye bank, and these images are graded by an expert eye bank technician. So what is also being done is these images are being fed into a machine learning model, which eventually will be able to grade corneas automatically without the need for an eye bank technician in the future. And thus, several eye collection centers can transform themselves into eye distribution centers or eye banks, from where corneas can be supplied to corneal surgeons as well. The second question that we also wanted to address is about accessibility. Now, this map on the left side is a map of all the members of the Cornea Society of India. There are more than 1,000 members right now, and this is a society of which Dr. Namrata Sharma is president right now. And you see that there are people or members of the society all across the country. There are a few gaps in central India, but they are relatively evenly distributed, which means that it is probably not the fact that we don't have enough corneal surgeons, nor do we have adequate corneal surgeons in rural areas as well to perform these surgeries, but probably about them having access to corneal tissues. And when we did a survey, we found that about a quarter of corneal surgeons don't perform surgery or corneal transplants because they did not have access to tissue, and patients were not able to afford surgery as a next big chunk. So how do you change this? Several years ago, when SightLife came to India, they came and they set up a cornea distribution system to ensure that tissues don't go to waste, and surgeons who are present in remote areas also have access to tissues as well. But after SightLife has exited India, this corneal distribution system has sort of faltered. So probably what is the need of the hour is to be able to create a system where all surplus corneas across the country or in partner eye banks are listed online on a mobile application, and surgeons are able to view these corneas that are available and to set up an effective distribution system that will match the requirements of the surgeon with what is available on eye banks, and also be able to send these corneas in real time and appropriately stored to surgeons who require them at the right time as well. And we believe that this probably can also solve some of the issue with accessibility. Now, the next big problem is accountability. And accountability is in trying to enhance the survival of corneal transplants. All of us know that the diseases that we take care of generally have poor survival. And to compound that, about half our patients don't come back for regular follow-ups at the end of 1 year after corneal transplant surgery. Now, this is a problem not just in rural areas, but in cities as well. And this is an example of a patient who comes from a family of doctors who had an injury to the eye, but also the patient did not show up for his previous few follow-ups and then only came because he had an injury to the eye. So it probably is not just the patients who are not adequately educated, but also patients who believe that everything is doing well and patients who are not counseled enough about the importance of follow-up care who are contributing to this problem. And in fact, all of us in the eye banking field invest a significant amount of time per donor cornea. It's estimated that about 33 hours of man work goes into procuring and evaluating and finally distributing one donor cornea. And that is a significant amount of effort by a huge team of back-end eye bank personnel. And we found that one of the reasons why patients don't come back for follow-up is that about half of them, at least in the LVP system, live more than 200 kilometers from where the hospital is located. And you heard a little while back how Dr. Rao said we are trying to solve that by trying to perform corneal transplants in rural centers as well. But in addition to that, there is another unique way in which we're trying to solve that, where we've collected all the information from about 30,000 transplants so far and created an online database. And this database now feeds into an AI model, which will be able to predict not only which graft is likely not to do well, but also is able to predict which patient is likely to miss a follow-up visit and where these patients who are likely to miss a follow-up visit are from as well. And this predictive model right now is available for testing on a mobile phone, which can be utilized not just by the eye surgeon, but also by a team of support staff who will be able to understand which patients might not follow up. And then they can actually start to put in interventions like a call center, which focuses on patients who are likely to drop out of follow-up or who have not followed up, so that patients are reminded that they need to come back for follow-up and to ensure that they need to have regular medication in their eye as well. Now, in addition to that, we've also developed what is called a keratoplasty chatbot, along with a foundation in the US called Rian Foundation. This is a multilingual chatbot on WhatsApp, which is able to gather patient symptoms and is also able to analyze the image taken from the patient's eye and helps patients navigate to the nearest hospital in case they have a problem with their corneal transplant. And in fact, this is very useful because it also is able to help patients identify which hospital is close by and also is able to help schedule an appointment after evaluating the status of the eye and also set up an appointment system for them if they need care in the near future. And we believe that this is a bot that is very similar to a bot that is built for the American Heart Association. Will also ensure that follow-up care is better for post-corneal transplant patients as well. You heard about Grabby that Dr. Rao spoke about. Again, a very simple kind of device, almost very, very low cost, now being given free to all corneal transplant patients, where a patient is able to take a photograph of their eye and share it with their care provider on teleconsultation. These are all pictures that have been taken on mobile phones over the last several years. And we've been able to also detect conditions such as acute rejection in the eye and been able to start treatment even before the patient reaches a hospital, thus saving several corneal transplants as well. Now, in addition to this, the technology team is also collecting all these images and putting them through an annotation system, as well as creating an ML model. And in the future, this ML model is probably going to serve as a remote monitoring system by uploading all pictures that patients have taken of their eyes. And once they upload this picture, an automatic alert can be given to patients who have an early complication like a rejection or maybe a loose suture or even an infection in the eye. And then there is an automatic system that a teleconsult can be either fixed or the patient can be asked to come for a follow-up in the as soon as possible. So putting all of these technologies together, as well as putting all these interventions together to prevent transplant failures, we believe not only is important from the point of view of enhancing eye banking and increasing the number of tissues available for transplant, but also ensuring that the transplants we do are also of high value and survive longer than they are currently. So the key challenges that we discussed so far from the point of view of corneal transplants are obviously affordability, availability of corneal tissues, access to corneal transplants and corneal tissues as well, and accountability. And accountability means not just patients, but accountability for all of us, because we are equally responsible not just to do corneal transplants, but also ensure that the wishes of a donor to ensure that somebody sees after them are fulfilled to the complete extent. And we also fulfill our roles as corneal transplant surgeons in the future. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I hope that all of us can work together to ensure that we enhance corneal transplant survival, as well as ensure that more patients who have corneal blindness will be able to see effectively. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Praveen. I think that was just the next level of eye banking, which you put so nicely in a nutshell. But I'm sure even corneal transplant surgeons who are there, what to talk of general ophthalmologists, even corneal transplant surgeons and corneal specialists would not be aware of all the ways and the techniques and the way you have harnessed the technology to take eye banking to next level, so that it is of benefit not only to us but also to the patients. So thank you for that excellent presentation.
Thank you. So that sort of brings to an end all the talks that we have, but I'm sure if there are any questions or comments, we could talk about that in the next few minutes.
So we did have, I've mentioned in the chat box also, close to 800 plus people on YouTube, Facebook, and in the Zoom. So I'm sure they would have questions. And if Sunil, can you post questions in the chat box if there are any?
Mostly it's gratitude messages only, thanking for a wonderful webinar.
Okay, okay. So I think, can we have the final comments from Dr. Rao?
Thank you, Namrata. I think I only say we have all the capabilities. Money is not a problem. If people think money is a problem, in my view, money is the least of the problems. And we have competencies, we have brilliant people, brilliant scientists, brilliant surgeons. And these people, we all should work together across the country, learn from each other, replicate the good points from each other, and then move forwards at an accelerated pace. I believe in our country, in the area of cornea, we have already waited too long, and there is no time to waste any longer. So I sincerely hope that we will act now, and in the not too distant future, we will be the #1 corneal care country in the world. And we have every chance to make it. If we don't make it, we only have ourselves to blame, nobody else. It's a wide open opportunity to be #1 in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rao. Anybody else would want to say anything? Prashant?
Yeah, so I think in a year when we are celebrating eradication of trachoma, which was one of the leading causes of corneal opacity, and the model that has ensured that we perform corneal transplant effectively. It's a kind of a very optimistic situation for us to really move corneal related blindness out of our list of importance in blindness. And I think all the talks that were delivered today have given enough ideas as to what need to be done. We possibly need to act now.
Thank you, Prashant and Praveen, and then Sunita, and then word of gratitude from Dr. Manoj Mathur. Praveen, I think you said it all.
No, I think, again, to reiterate, I think alone, we will never be able to reach this by individual work. And I think to reach a common goal such as this, it is essential that all of us join hands together and make a final push to ensure that we get there in the future as well. From that perspective, again, we should thank, I think, AIOS as well as all the bodies who also believe in furthering this cause. And we hope that all of us will work together to achieve this amazing goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sunita.
I think thanks to everyone, and thanks to everybody for organizing this. And same thing, just echo. It's just our country has, and together if we work, I think make a lot of difference in the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunita. And I think we need to thank Dr. Santosh Honavar, who was instrumental in organizing this. And word of gratitude from Dr. Manoj Mathur, the Treasurer of All India Ophthalmological Society.
Thank you, Dr. Namrata. It is my pleasant duty and privilege to propose a vote of thanks from the AIOS headquarters. At the outset, it was the vision of Dr. Rao, which was turned into an achievable mission by Team LVPEI and attained the stupendous success of 50,000 corneal transplants. As it is rightly pointed out by all the speakers, the future should be a collaborative effort with all leaders of all eye banks to achieve eradication of corneal blindness, as suggested by Dr. Prashant. So I propose a vote of thanks to Dr. Rao, to Dr. Prashant, to Dr. Samar, who did the session initially, and all the speakers, Dr. Rao, Dr. Sunita, Dr. Praveen, Dr. Prashant, and also the chairperson, Dr. Namrata, who is the president of the Corneal Society of India. It is my pleasure to propose, thank everybody and all the members, AIOS members who attended this enlightening exposition about corneal transplants. Thank you very much.
Can I say one thing? 1 minute.
Yes.
Congratulations to Dr. Namrata Sharma on her graduation to a mother-in-law.
Thank you.
We all join in congratulating her.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prashant. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I think with this, we close this, and let's hope very soon we will be celebrating 100,000 corneal transplants in a year, as has been said, much earlier than the deadline that Dr. Rao has given us.
So promise, Namrata, you do it before I exit from the scene completely.
Oh my God. We all have to make that promise, I think. Prashant, Praveen, Sunita, and everybody who's a cornea specialist and into eye banking.
Thank you.
4,500 already there. That figure will be rising to about 6,000 soon. And then not a decade, 7 to 8 years, they should be able to achieve 1 lakh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We finish, would like to invite all of you who've been part of this program to also the annual meeting of the Corneal Society of India, which is Caracon 2024, which is going to be held in Bangalore from the 6th to the 8th of December. We already have over 650 registrations And it seems that it's going to be the biggest meeting ever. And it's also going to be the first silent meeting where headphones will be used for all talks. And we have a stellar set of faculty who will be coming as well. For those of you interested in corneal transplants, please do make sure that you come and join us for this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.